Hello, all. This is Dan Stout. This is my ultimate story. Um, Started playing in either 1975 or spring in 1981, just depends on what you want to call ultimate. I'll clear that up a little bit later. Quit playing in 2005. That is the last photo taken of me before I quit playing. I'm wearing my Day Trippers reunion team shirt there and pulling on it. And yeah, so I was a good player. I think I was as good as anyone. It's my theory that at any one time there's 250 or so really good players out there, and the best teams have a bunch of those, and little teams like ours had a couple of them. So I was tall, 6'2". I was a really good handler. It's really all I know how to do. It's very fast. I was diving full, had great pulls, and I claim, without evidence, except for my own experience, I might have had the most hand blocks of all time. I never saw anybody playing who got more than I did. So, most top 10, whatever. I'd get a hand block every couple games or so on. There were games, next to last game I played, I had four. It was fairly common to get, maybe two, one or two. And then, lots of games you don't get any. So that's my background. So prior to Ultimate, I didn't really play any organized sports beyond Little League baseball, but played baseball, basketball, football, and tennis. So what's kind of interesting is in about 1975, we were playing some sandlot football, just a bunch of neighborhood friends. And one of the guys got out a Frisbee and showed us how to play this Frisbee football. And whoever this was, I don't recall who it was, didn't really know the rules of Ultimate, but picked up a little bit. And so what we did was it was like football with a Frisbee. And when you threw it and when someone caught it, they could throw it again within 2 steps. So kind of the opposite of Ultimate, but in some ways similar. So I was like 14 or 15 at that point. Moving on into high school, we had a group of us Frisbee fanatics at our high school, and we talked our gym coach into letting us play this Frisbee football indoor on the basketball court in the winter. And we did that for 2 years. I had not remembered this, but I recently met with 2 of my old first teammates, and they reminded me of it. And I have some images in my brain of playing Frisbee football in there in our Rockbridge High School gym. We became real Frisbee fanatics. And I love to quote, somebody from Windy City said this, is that the guys who came into Ultimate early, we had been throwers before we found Ultimate. I like that sentiment. So we spent hundreds of hours out and usually on this huge parking lot that had lights, just throwing Frisbees. And those were 141s and Masters at the time. I didn't like the 141s. I liked the Masters. Funny thing about the Masters was I was a thumber pre-real Ultimate. And those Masters would eat a hole in my wrist, particularly when they were get jagged from the parking lot. And I'd be bleeding and with my throwing hand and bleeding on the disc. And back in those days, what was a little blood between friends, Seems kind of disgusting now. So in the spring of 1981, I was walking across the quad of the University of Missouri, and I saw these guys playing Frisbee football, though not like we did. And it turned out these were the disc jocks. They're a bunch of St. Louis students, and they were playing Ultimate. So I took off my leather shoes and played in long pants and barefoot. And they were very amused that I was a thumber, but I think I did okay. So shortly after that, I attended a meeting held by Roger Giles and Doc Campbell here in Columbia, Missouri. And it was a sign-up meeting for City League. And so we signed up a team, and that team was the Day Trippers. That's a shot of the Day Trippers. This is in Lawrence, Kansas in '83. I am way back in the back here. And we were kind of famous for our shirts and more so for our cool headbands at the time. So this was the logo on our first shirt. And my teammates, Matt and Henry, went and got this made. And when they returned with it, I was kind of horrified. I mean, it was 1981. I just thought having a pot leaf on there was going to be trouble if we just wore it around like I would wear my Ultimate jerseys everywhere. But now, looking back on it, I think it's probably the coolest shirt ever made. Really funny to me. So we played in a City League, and we had a few practices before the City League. We got to City League and discovered cones. And we were like, hey, we need some cones. How do we get cones? There was no Amazon. Where would we get a catalog? I had no idea where to get cones. So being the juvenile delinquents that we were, we went out and found some road construction at the busiest intersection in Columbia, and snuck up a creek and climbed a hill and rushed out and grabbed 4 cones and run off. And there's a couple of funny things about that. I did stop and make sure we hadn't left anything dangerous. I rearranged the remaining cones so that it would still do their job. And the other thing was these cones were like 3 feet tall, and they had a bunch of tar on them. They were nasty. You could almost get hurt if you hit them wrong. And just carried those things around in my car for a couple of years, and I have no idea what became of them. So we formed the Day Trippers, played in City League. We did okay for a new and unexperienced team. No one on the team had prior experience with Ultimate. We were all newbies coming into it. I mean, I'd played once besides our old Frisbee football stuff. So our first tournament was here at home in Columbia, 1981 sectionals when it was in the fall. And this thing was a mud fest, man. It stormed 2 days before and all during the tournaments, and we churned those fields into 4 inches of mud. We had most of the day we had 7 or 8 players. Sometimes people had to come and go, and just exhausting. Look at this though. The little Missouri Iowa section had what? 4, 9, 13. Had 18 men's teams. That's pretty cool. So we were down here in Pool D, and we went 2-2. Not too bad for a brand new team of high school buddies. Their last game there was against Outside Loop, and they skunked us. And that might be the only time in my whole life I was skunked, and I was really not happy about that. I think that game we were playing with 7, and I was probably the only person who really knew how to play. So soon after that, the Day Trippers went to a tournament in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And we had very few. Half of us arrived Friday, the night before, and while the other half was driving down, they were pulled over and arrested for possession, paraphernalia, and open alcoholic cans. And they were in a lot of trouble, and eventually they wrote, basically floated a check for $1,000, got out, made it to the tournament. With them, we had 8. And one of our three handlers was in a walking cast, and the other was his girlfriend who had played like once or twice before at our practices. And so we played this tournament in Tulsa heat on this baked soil, 100 plus degrees with 8 players, two of which were like halves. And we did not do very well. I know we beat the horizontals, and they suffered like us. They only had 6. And they wanted to play 6-on-6, and we refused. We were kind of a dick move, but hey, we wanted to win a game, and we were suffering too. So we beat them in that game. Also at that tournament, gosh, I know at least one other guy saw it. Was a game between Springfield, Missouri, and Dallas, and we're talking about pre-tuna time. Springfield and Dallas were powerhouse teams at that point. That was one of the most amazing games I ever saw. Springfield was stacked and loaded. Dallas was stacked and loaded. There was 2 tall guys. You guys know Big Jim and LJ in Springfield. And it was just a war. It was one of those games that was 21-19. Lots of blood, lots of diving, lots of sweat. Really, really impressed me. During this time, I had a mentor, maybe 2 mentors. One was Jim Doom. He was here in Columbia, really from St. Louis, and he moved back to St. Louis after college. But he played with Boone County Ozone Outlaws, but we would meet up on the quad and basically do some drills. We basically played guts with just 2 people, and the thought was to make catchable but bad throws. We used to throw 3 discs, 2 people, and you can't ever be caught holding 2. Always really liked that drill. Really good on concentration. The other was Jim Carmody, who was one of the tunas and was here going to college. And we did more bad freestyle and just throwing and, talking about strategy and stuff like that. Here's this story from the Day Trippers that I always think is funny. So we were a bunch of potheads, and half of us were tobacco smokers. And one of these early tournaments, we played the tunas. And this was when the tunas were roaring up to become national champions, I think in 84. So it was probably in 83 or 80, maybe 82. Playing the tunas, first off, we didn't stand a chance. But I got several good poaching Ds. And one of my favorite memories is Tom Hyman yelling, "Him again!" So we would annoy them on purpose. We would call timeout, and we would go over and smoke certain substances. Sometimes we'd bring them back to the line with us. And they were just, they were majority old soccer players. They were just so disgusted with us. Oh, God, how could we do such a thing? So Day Trippers did another thing that was both brilliant and lazy at the same time. So if we were winded, and maybe with the wind at our backs, we would throw a pull and not leave the line. We would let them bring it up the field unguarded. Every once in a while, somebody would turn it over unguarded coming up the field. We would set up, it's basically, you could call it a 5-2 or you could call it a 1-4-2. We would put those 4 guys on the goal line. 1 guy would mark, 2 guys would play in the end zone. And it was remarkably successful. I mean, we really got a lot of turnovers doing that. It leaves some open spots, but the other team has to have good throwers to get it over into the back corner or something like that. If they try to force it, when they tried to force it through, that did not work very well. So come 83, 2 years of Day Trippers, I was working really hard physically, running, biking, stuff like didn't even own a car. I biked and ran everywhere. Doing triathlons, did a couple 100-mile triathlons in that time period. Um, and I realized day trippers weren't going anywhere. Even though these guys were my best friends, I was just frustrated and tired, and I wanted to do bigger, better things. So I left the day trippers. And in that sectionals, I played with the Spanish Lakers. Didn't do any better than day trippers. I made a pilgrimage to St. Louis and went to one of their practices. My remembrance is not a one of them said a word to me. I was not welcome. Um, I got in for a couple points when everybody else was packing up and leaving. That was it. So I was kind of disappointed. Even if we didn't get along, they knew I was a good player. Let's see here. The day trippers went on, made the Smurfs for just that fall season. That was funny. So after the day trippers, we did try to put together a Mizzou, University of Missouri team. Went to a UFO tournament in Springfield with that. Didn't work out very well. I had a badly sprained ankle at that point, and I taped it up real well, but couldn't play real well. We just didn't gel. Also during this time, I drove to Carbondale just to watch regionals. Parked my car, got out, shut the door, and turned to walk to the fields. First thing I saw was a group of women dancing around a pole that had a fish head dangling from it. Now, everybody knows about this now, but this was when it was happening. And I was just stunned. And of course, they're dancing around the pole going, ultimate is our life. We think of nothing else. And I loved it, man. It's like, there's other crazy people like me out here. And just, I can still hear that chant. And thank the fish heads for doing that to me. I love it. So in 1984, I believe 4 of us from the Day Trippers joined the Boone County Ozone Outlaws. All right, with the Ozone Outlaws, this is a screen capture of me from 1984 video, and you can see that's the same shirt right there that I'm wearing right there. Good times. I was probably there and in Kansas City was in the best shape I ever was playing Ultimate. This was a good team. They'd been formed in 1978 by Roger and had been our chief rival, in-town rival. And but anyway, 4 of us joined Ozone Outlaws. Me and Matt Zanoni became kind of key players on that team. Interesting about this tenure with the Ozone Outlaws was that we had, we could field maybe 16 for tournaments, and we basically had 2 teams within this team. We had Ozone, which was the students, and they would go in as a group. Those 7 students would go in as a group, and we had Outlaws, which were the locals, and we would go in as a group. And it worked pretty well. It was 2 good teams trading out. They weren't O or D or anything like that. They were just people who knew, liked, grew up together, all that kind of stuff. And that was pretty cool. First year we played with them, we made it to regionals, which is a big triumph for a little team like that. That was in Lexington, Kentucky. I know we played, I have the brackets. We won 1 game against the Terrapins, Minneapolis Terrapins. So what I really remember from that was on Saturday morning before the games, I was stretching out, and we were right next. It was on Polo Field, so it was right next to we were right next to the horse stalls, and I put my hand up on a wood fence to get some leverage for stretching, and there was electrified wire there, and it just shocked the hell out of me and woke me up better than coffee. Played like 2 or 3 seasons here in Columbia with Ozone Outlaws. Life kind of fell apart, and I moved to Kansas City. So when I arrived in Kansas City, we put together what really, really looked like a great nationals caliber team. They had the old guys, the old Ultimatos, and got an influx of new blood from Lawrence, Kansas, and Columbia and other places. And myself, Dave DeWitt, Bob Egan. There's more that joined up. Anyway, it was just a really good team. We had the best practices that I ever had throughout my career in Ultimate. Really coached practices, and had such high hopes. And then people started falling to injury, usually devastating knee injuries, ACLs and such. And if you remember in those days, ACL tear, you were done. You might could get out there with a big old brace, but there was no repairing it in those days. And we lost our coach, Chip Manson. We lost Mike Bear, Mark Troxel. The team just, like the whole leadership just folded, and it was downhill from there. We made a couple trips to Boulder with that team, which is always fun. I remember one Boulder tournament. I think we had played 6 games on Saturday, and we had oxygen tanks. And oxygen tanks are really helpful, especially in Boulder. I think they'd be really helpful at sea level as well. Kind of the final straw there in KC is sectionals were there in KC, and we put together a team. And none of the core, I shouldn't say none, I was there, but most of the core guys were out hurt or not there, and we just stunk. It was just horrible. It was embarrassing. We didn't even make it to regionals, and KC was perennial second to Tunas most of the time in sectionals. Really embarrassing. So in 1988, I left Kansas City, moved to Springfield, Missouri to finish my college education. I found the guys there, and soon we had a team called Roadkill. That shirt right there. Yeah, we formed a team called Roadkill. Good players, several of these guys, Neil Adams, Mike Mills. I've forgotten the tall guy here. We called him Ganja. That's me right there. Our friend Sluggo, Steve Shue, Jumpin' Joe, Spike, Shane, don't remember his name, Chris Conley, he was still playing, and Neil Adams. And this was a good team. I mean, the best team I had played on, besides the few moments prior injury in Kansas City. And we could play with anybody. The problem was we usually had 12. And no matter how good you are, it's hard to play 12 in the big tournaments. You can play the first game well, and then your legs start getting heavy. So let's see. Roadkill was the probably my favorite team I played on. Probably had the most fun playing Ultimate with that group. So one little memory I have with Roadkill was we formed about half that group right there are college students. And so we had an intramural Ultimate League, and we've had a team. And of course, we just killed everybody because we knew what we were doing. But we played the basketball team, and it wasn't the starters, but it was the bottom guys on the team. Still, they had they had bunches of guys over 6 feet. I'm 6'2", and they had several taller than me. And they started off by just putting it up and catching it and got a lead on us. Now, we fought back. But one of the memories I have was so I was running away from the disc. Somebody threw an upside down to me, running straight away from them. Not an advisable throw. I went up and I caught that thing between those 2 fingers, trailing edge, those 2 fingers upside down in front, over my head in front of me. Best catch I ever made. It was such a good catch. I stopped the game and just was like, holy shit, how did I do that? Was lucky. So Roadkill, we went to a couple poultry days. And another funny thing there was, let's get my cursor over here. So Springfield, Missouri, roadkill. Springfield's in the middle of the Ozarks. We have hillbillies, and most of us were not so much, but our friend Sluggo here, very good player. Um, Later on, Mo Better. Sluggo definitely sounded like a hillbilly. And so there was some stoppage of play and, a pick or foul or whatever. And about to put it back into play, and you hear Sluggo yell, "Now hold on." And the other team, I don't know who they were much more urban than us. And it just his hillbilly yell just cracked them up. And they were going, "We got a hold on call." Somebody look in the rules, see what you do on the hold on call. I was going to geology school. So in geology school, you go out and you do field work. It's field camp. So I spent 8 weeks in the Wyoming mountains, hiking up and down them, 6.5 days a week. All of it over 1,000 feet in elevation and so on. So I came back and there was a tournament in town. We have the video of it. I have the video posted. And boy, I was just so light and springy, and oh God, it was fun. I couldn't even get tired in that nice thick air. 91, I graduated from Southwest Missouri State at the time. I decided to go to grad school. I moved back home to Columbia. So I made a big circle from Columbia, KC, Springfield, back to Columbia. Was the shirt just over my head, the Mutants. So practiced with them in little tournaments, played with them. But at this point in time, Roger Giles was putting together Mo Better Masters. It's the first year of the Masters division. And I made the cutoff by, I don't know, I think it was a month and 13 days. I was usually the youngest master on the field. So for Mo Better, we had really good practices. People would drive in from KC, Springfield, St. Louis to Columbia because it's central. We'd have good structured practices. Mo Better was people from Carbondale, Illinois, St. Louis, Columbia, Missouri, Kansas City, Lawrence, Springfield, Fayetteville, and Little Rock. It was a really good team, and it was a big team. I'm not used to that, but it was different for me going to tournaments with 18 or 20 or 22. Played at Poultry Days. I remember we did very, very well. And so Sunday morning for quarterfinals or something like that, half the team had to leave. They had to leave and drive, 16 hours or whatever, straight to work. And it left us with the skeleton crew. And we knew we weren't going to win. We're in the quarters, big tournament with, 9 people. And so we just relaxed and had fun. Basically lost on purpose. It was not going to be worth the fight. It's too bad those guys couldn't have stayed because it would have been fun to go farther. Poultry Days for us was a pretty big tournament. After that came 1991 Toronto Worlds, which was a great experience, and it was fun. As far as Ultimate went, it wasn't so great for me. I was banged up. We picked up players I wasn't used to playing with. I made a couple mistakes, got discouraged. I was broke. I was sleeping on the floor in the hotel room. People whose floor I was sleeping on didn't want me sleeping on their floor. They put up with me. So I had a couple moments, but otherwise, I really didn't contribute all that much. I got us there, though, or I really helped get us there. So also with Mo Better Masters, so Mo Better Masters went to 2 Worlds and 2 Nationals in Masters. I went to 1 and 1. Went to 1 Nationals in Santa Barbara, San Diego. I don't know. It was one where a whole bunch of balloons took off. And we had kind of a skeleton team. I think we only had 12 or so. most of the KC guys. And I don't even know if we won a game. We had some huge matchups against the St. Louis Masters, because it's like St. Louis Masters and us. We took all the talent in all the states around Missouri, and just slugfests. I remember there was one game against those guys, I believe in Kansas City. It was, I guess they call it Universe Point now. It's like 12-12 playing to 13. St. Louis worked the disc down, threw it to somebody in the corner of the end zone, and I made a diving D and stopped it. And we worked it up the field and turned it over. They came back down, and basically the same thing. I had a diving D and stopped it. Me, twice in a row. Really proud of that. And we worked it up field and turned it over. And then they scored, and we lost 13-12 or whatever it was. Always remembered that, though. During this time, one of the most interesting things that ever happened to me in Ultimate happened. So I went up to a little tournament in Pella, Iowa, and some of the Springfield and Fayetteville, Arkansas guys were supposed to meet us up there and to form a team and play. We've been doing this for years, and we did it afterwards too. And those guys didn't show up. So I ended up picking up with the Pella 3 team. Now, Pella's a small town. I don't even know. It's 20,000, something like that. A lot smaller than even my hometown, Columbia. So I picked up with the Pella 3 team. There was one other experienced guy. I believe his name was Jamie. And the rest were all high school kids. They didn't have disc skills, but they were fast. They played good D, and they could jump. So after a couple of points, they figured out, hey, Dan, and you, Jamie, when you get the disc, put it in the end zone, and we'll catch it. We did that, and it worked. So can you imagine playing on a team where they say, hey, every time you get it, huck it? That's what it was. It was really cool. I'm the man to do that, too. We won that tournament. We beat a pretty strong go Kansas City team in the final. Always really proud of that. It was really fun and funny. So I moved to Denver in the middle 90s and didn't play there. Returned to Missouri in 1999, back to Springfield. Roadkill really was no more, but the core of the group is still playing, usually teaming up with either the Fayetteville guys or guys from St. Louis. Played a little bit with them. I was kind of out of shape and rusty. I just played a supporting role. Played a little bit there in Springfield. In 2001, moved back to Columbia. 40 years old at that point. I told you about the Pella tournament where I went up and picked up with Pella 3. Well, this is 3 Missouri boys and 4 Northern Arkansas boys, also at Pella, year before, year after, or whatever. We played Savage. So these are all good friends of mine. I'm there on the left side, and I chose this picture because look at those arms, man. I got some long-ass arms. How do you think I got all those hand blocks? All right, here's just a couple more better shots. This would be the team at Poultry Days prior to 91 Worlds in Toronto. This would be the team at Toronto. This is me way back here in the back. That's my mentor, Jim Doom. There's Roger, who really put it all together. This was a really good team. And so in 2002, I moved to St. Louis to be with a girlfriend. She was a player, longtime player, legend herself. And we mostly played on mixed teams. I don't really, it just changed. We just go to tournaments and pick up. People always needed, mixed teams always needed a couple more players. That was fun. I suffered from a lot of plantar fasciitis at that time, and sometimes it limited me. But it was fun. This is when I really began working on the mechanics of pulling and watching videotapes on throwing poles. And unlike hand blocks, I'm not making great claims about poles. I'm good. There's a lot better than I am, but I think they're really important, especially with the rule change to where if it's inbounds, you got to take it. That's a powerful tool, man. I have other publications on that stuff. So played in St. Louis Summer League. So in 2005, the relationship had fallen apart, and part of working through the anxiety, I got in really good shape again. I was running, biking, taking yoga classes religiously. Really, boy, man, yoga classes are good for ultimate. So Summer League, we went out in the first game. I got 4 hand blocks in that game, my next to last game. We won that game. Went on to the next game. We received the pull. For some reason, I took it at the cone. I don't know if it landed right there, but anyway, took it at the cone, and dude broke deep, and I launched it basically end zone to end zone. And in my follow through, a kid ran in front of me, and I broke my throwing arm on his face. I thought I broke his face. The whole field heard the crack. I really heard it. Of course, it resonated in my body. I thought I had broken his face, and I figured out I couldn't turn my hand over anymore. So that was the last game I played. What was fun is I drove myself in my stick shift to the hospital and so on. After that, I went back to school, got an engineering degree. I was in Raleigh, Missouri, and people were playing there, but I could never find them. After I got my engineering degree, I moved to Paducah, Kentucky. There were people who played there, and I went out a few times, and only like 3 or 4 people showed up, and we threw, and that was it. Then moved to Hot Springs, Arkansas. Never found anything there. Ultimate started appearing on cable TV, and I got really interested. I mean, I always loved it. Ultimate is a life. Thinking nothing else. And so just this last year, I started hanging out at Summer League, not playing, but just throwing. And then while they're playing, I'll film a little bit and I'll go off and practice throwing poles, which is surprisingly good exercise just by itself. This spring, I'm going to try to play. I'm going to 3 points. I'm going to play 3 points. That goes all right. Next week, I'll play 3 or 4 or whatever. Hard part for me will be holding back because, I'm still 22 in my head. So, well, that's my story. Kind of hope it was interesting. I hope you'll make one of these videos. Bye. Hello again. I was editing this thing and I realized I left out 2 pieces that I think are interesting, at least. First off was I had, a superstition and a half. The one real superstition was I never crossed a goal line, whether throwing the pull or receiving a pull. I always had my back to the goal line, always facing the other team, always facing forward. And I started that in the 80s, and as silly as it was, I continued to do it my whole 25 years I played. The other was in the 80s, we tended to cut up our shirts, like the Day Tripper shirt back there. So all those little strips, those became wristbands. And so you'll, in pictures and videos and stuff, you'll see I got rags wrapped around just my throwing arm. And this also ties back to pre-Ultimate, using those ragged parking lot masters throwing, where the disc would cut a hole in my wrist. It cut a hole like right there. And so I'd wrap it up to keep that friction off. And, within a year of playing Ultimate, I'd pretty much given up the thumb except for occasional pulls with it. So the other thing is I played the entirety of my career in the Central region. And, second most would be in the Southern region. But I lived and played and home was in Central region. So the 3 guys that if I knew I was guarding him, I was kind of like, oh, crap. And that would be Neil Adams, who just passed away yesterday, Doug Parrish, and Paul Greff. Those guys were the threats, man. I felt like I could handle anybody else. And no disrespect, great players, all over the place. So, all right, that's my little addendum. Bye again.